And it's like, why am I doing it? Am I doing it to prove that I can? Am I doing it because I think it's going to add value in a different way? And it's kind of what I'm being called to do. So I would say you are good enough and you are doing enough, and it's all going to be okay.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success.
I am really excited to have my next guest, Pamela Zapata, on the show from Society 18. You're going to talk about something in a different way, I think, than anybody's on the podcast has spoken about it before. And I will say, even in 450 plus episodes, we haven't had that many people talk about influencer marketing and why it's so important. So I welcome you to the show. I welcome everything we're going to get into and chop it up today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, you have a lot of experience. We were just laughing about before we jumped on from both coasts. So I'd love to hear how you got your start. Were you always interested in influencer? Were there other things that you did before and then you found your way there?
Yeah, so initially I went to school for broadcast journalism. I thought I wanted to be an on-camera host, not so much like hard-hitting news, but more so entertainment. And then I moved to LA through an internship that I had at Emerson, and discovered this through my internships. I interned at Disney Channel and Univision. And at Disney, I was working on the talent and the casting side of things. And I thought that was so fascinating because there was this whole other behind the scenes world that didn't really necessarily involve me being me necessarily being the talent, but helping support talent. And I realized slowly that I liked working behind the scenes more than even being on camera. And then from there, I worked at Ryan Seacrest Production and TV development. So that was a little more obviously behind the scenes work, understanding, how TV shows were made. That was off of the Kardashian becoming a huge hit. So we were constantly looking for the next family to follow, or we were doing a lot of unscripted development. And then from there, I went to work at E! Entertainment on the buying side. So I went from the production to the buying as a network. You're buying talent, you're buying shows, acquiring shows. And so that's really when I noticed that there was this shift in interest in influencer versus traditional talent. So our team would handle all the talent bookings for E! Online, E! News. So all of the E! properties, we would handle all of the casting for. And At the time, we had The Soup and Chelsea lately, so a lot of comedians. And what I realized is that there was this massive shift in terms of desire to work with more so content creators and influencers. So YouTubers at that time was the interest because they wanted to kind of bring that online audience back to linear, which now we're seeing is just people are just straying away from linear and more is digital. So that's kind of my pivot into the influencer marketing space.
Amazing. And how did you go to starting your own business and getting all these accolades? I'm looking at my list of Forbes Next 1000 honoree, Business Insider top YouTube talent managers, Business Insider top 15 talent managers for micro influencers, on and on and on.
Yeah. So from there, from E! I went to work at a management company. Back in the day, it was called Style Hall. It was a small MCN. And then worked at a startup where I was really working with a lot of Musical.ly talent. Before it was TikTok, which is interesting.
Nice.
It kind of had a whole rebrand. And then made my way to New York, worked at UEG and Star Power, which were two agencies that were overseeing Estee Lauder and Unilever influencer marketing. And so essentially I was handling a lot of the beauty and the personal care brands under those agencies. And so I was working on Dove, Tresemme, Axe, Simple, a lot of the personal care brands. And then at Star Power under Estee Lauder, I was working on Estee, Bobbi Brown, MAC, Aveda, Origins. So what I noticed essentially is that there was a lack of diversity amongst the rosters that were being sent to me when I was casting for these initiatives. I was handling strategy, casting, execution, reporting, end-to-end campaigns. And the casting piece, for whatever reason, was sometimes challenging to find really diverse talent. And I'm not just talking Black, brown, Asian, Caucasian. I'm talking about diversity as it pertains to not just race, ethnicity, but skin tones, body types, hair textures. I didn't really see Muslim women being represented. I didn't really see plus size women or men being represented. And I knew creators existed out there, but it was not they were not being presented to me by these bigger management agencies. Was just kind of where the seed was planted. Whereas I was like, I need to work with these creators. And on top of that, there was a massive pay gap where I was asking for rates from these creators, and the creators that were not represented were coming in 50% to 75% lower than what everyone else was coming in at.
Wow. I just applaud you so much for this mission and this passion, because I completely agree. And there's so many different things to think about with accessibility and with equality and equity, all the things that you just listed. I've been also talking to a lot of people lately for this and my USC podcast about interviewed like a blind blogger, a woman who has Tourette's, but does a lot of social impact work, an autistic guy who had me on his podcast. Like there are all these other forms of diversity as well, where these are going to be really invested consumers for a brand if they see representation. And that's exactly what you've been creating, is this representation, but also the parity of monetary compensation, because I think a lot of people don't understand, how to do that properly. Like if they're just based, especially for micro influencers, basing off of like a CPM, which for those in the audience who might not know is, cost per thousand. They might not know that maybe that's not what they need to look for because they have this engagement.
Yeah. And I understand. I think thankfully I worked on the agency side representing the brand. So when we had certain CPMs, I would understand, all right, this is the goal. But like a lot of creators don't understand that, right? But then I think it's like education on both ends, because even now we get rates sent to us and a lot of the rationale behind it is CPM. But there's certain things that you can't, like, for example, when we get scopes of work for our creators, there's the deliverables, which is obviously like set, and then there's usages and then exclusivity. And then those usages and exclusivities bring up the rates, and then they're basing their CPMs off of the deliverables and the eyes, but then the cost is coming higher because you're also blocking the talent out from working with competitors during a certain amount of time, which means they're going to potentially lose out on deals. And then you're also using this content for paid digital website marketing. Like there's so many other ways. So like I understand to the desire for a brand to have certain CPM goals that they want to hit. But I think like understanding the creators aspects and the creators point of view in terms of, it can't also always be CPM based, because there's so many other things that bring value that you can't measure by eyeballs,
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Will you talk to us a little bit about the differences in types of influencers, micro, macro, celebrity, real people, things that brands should look at when they're thinking about who are the perfect people to represent my brand, my product, my service?
Yeah, so I think it just depends on their brand. Like, I think I personally, there's an influencer for everything and everyone, right? Every brand. I think it's really looking at creators that are, I think, first and foremost, authentic, organic ambassadors of your brand. Are they supporting you even if they're not getting paid? Nice. There's certain tools that even I used to use at my agency that you can pull up, like who's tagged my brand in the last 30 days, in the last 60 days. You can see the type of content they're creating. I would say start there. Do a search, even if you're just looking at your tags or your mentions, and just see who are your organic ambassadors, because they're the ones that are going to probably go the farthest and do the most for you in terms of just like added value content. And if they're already talking about the product, I mean, you have to think about it from a consumer perspective. It takes you a couple times to see something to actually influence purchase decision, right? So if this influencer is already using your product, tagging it, talking about it, they're already building that awareness. And I think as a consumer, you need to get your as a brand, you have to get your consumer down the funnel, right? So awareness, consideration, conversion. So maybe they would just need maybe a one-off or two-off campaign to really get and influence purchase decisions. So maybe linking out to the product, giving them some sort of like affiliate rev share, right? So affiliate links, you can track their progress. I would say start there, obviously looking at their engagement rates, looking at their content quality. Is it something that you can use for paid? Is it something you can use for your website? I would say those are like the best ways to start. And then from there, there's a ton of other things if you want to get really nitty gritty with their insights and target specific markets. You can look at their audience demographics, their age demographics, male to female ratio, all of those things. Like there's so many ways to find a creator nowadays. And I personally think it's one of the most powerful forms of marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting right now. What the class I'm teaching at USC is all about, video on demand, what different types of video, linear versus streaming, but also social media. And a lot of what we're talking about is equity and also UGC versus professionally produced content. And now brands really are making that shift because particularly, I mean, we all know since the pandemic, we were all looking for authentic content. We wanted to see people who are genuine because we're all feeling some kind of way. And so I think that's carried over and continued into now we just want to see, like you said, people who are really excited about the product. They're not just showing it because they're getting paid to do it, but it's actually something they're invested in. And we as followers can get more invested in it. And that's what brands are seeing.
Yeah, I feel that like the pandemic really shifted the space for us because to your point, they had to then rely on content creators to create these assets because studios were shut down, like productions were shut down. Nobody was shooting, like the world was shut down. So they had to get really creative in terms of like, how am I gonna, I still have to sell product, I still have a business to run. How am I gonna market and create assets completely remotely without having the full production team? And then they realized that influencers don't just influence. They are also, most of them are content creators. They are creating content. And then we saw like, content UGC campaigns where a lot of times it just wanted the assets without having the creator post. But I feel like it really shifted consumer behavior. And I think it just propelled the growth of this industry even more so.
Yeah. How hard was it to go from working, it sounds like you've had a dream life and I'm sure you've had hurdles. So I want to hear about those. Because, but you've worked at some really great places. You've worked hard and you've gotten all these great experiences. So I want to hear what were some of the things that you had to go through that were hurdles that you had to overcome. But then also when you started your own business, that's a whole other beast. So what was that like?
I feel like the hurdles have always been similar, but they shift. Like I think my entire career, I was like, I wanted to like, I was always big on like working for bigger corporations because I wanted to have these big names on my resume, which I'm so grateful that I did because there's so much that I learned from every single organization that I worked for. And then even when I went to this couple startups, it was like the complete opposite where I didn't have the name, but I was creating more of an impact because we were so small. And so, I mean, there's so many hurdles. I feel like I've always tried but wanted to prove, and I realized this like recently through therapy, always trying to prove myself, right? Like I can get this pay bump or this title, or I can accomplish this goal, whether it's monetary or title or role. Like I've always had these goals and I've, for the most part, have been able to achieve most of them. And the ones that didn't work out, I know didn't work out for a reason because like, for example, I was interviewed for Instagram right before I moved to New York and I was like excited to get that role. And I was like super excited about it. And I didn't end up getting it. And literally 6 months later, I moved to New York. And then a year and a half later, I started my business. And had that role worked out, I would have never moved. I would have never started my company. Like there's so many things that would have gone differently. So I would say like, even to anyone out there that has certain goals, like stick to your goals, but also be open to pivoting because you never know once a closed door closes, what other door might open. And it might not be something that you can see. But I feel like in terms of hurdles, I mean, everything from just like imposter syndrome, I think that's something that I've learned to manage, but still sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I did this. Like, this is crazy. Like, how did I get here? The rooms that I've been in since I started my agency have been rooms that I've always wanted to be in, but actually being in them, you have this like mental shift that you have to make for yourself. Like, no, I do deserve to be here. I have worked hard enough. I do fit in. I'm not, this big like elephant in the room where people are like staring at me. It's really just my own deep rooted insecurity in terms of like, oh my God, I actually did what I said I was going to do. It's like, yeah, like what else would you have expected? So I have to like check myself every once in a while, but lots of struggles, lots of struggles.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And something I hear also, and this is why also I'm like so down for what you're doing, is I have students who sometimes come to me and they've gotten these internships, but because they're people of color or, anything else, they're not treated the same as their colleagues on these internships a lot of times. So there's a lot to overcome. People might not think it, because they look at you, they're going to think, well, you're beautiful, you're accomplished, you have a great education, you have this great background, but that doesn't mean that you get it all or that other people aren't going to like maybe treat you different, treat you the same.
Yeah, and also like, I don't come from generational wealth. I don't have generational resources. Understanding how to start my business, file an LLC, grow a business, scale a business, how to hire, how to get taxes in place, how to get legal in place, how to, like, I mean, the list goes on. And a lot of it was me just figuring it out. Obviously now this year I hit year 5 and I feel like I finally got the groove. But those first 2 years were really dark. And I feel like entrepreneurship, I think, is people always see. And I think like even social media isn't always the most accurate. Like I travel a ton for pleasure and for work, but people don't know that like usually 90% of the time I'm working on that beach, right? Or I'm working on the plane, or I'm working even when I'm with my family. In the first 2 years, like I know I was in and out of depression. I wasn't working out. I was barely eating. I was working 16-hour days every day. I was working weekends. I was working nights. I wasn't seeing my family. I wasn't dating. I wasn't seeing friends. Like there's so much that you sacrifice as an entrepreneur that a lot of people don't understand. They only see, what's portrayed on social. And like, yeah, sometimes I don't have the bandwidth to get into, why I'm having a bad day, or like what issues I'm having with, my clients or my team or whatever the case is. And so I would say like, it's not always what it appears to be. And I think to your point, in terms of like people treat people differently who come from different backgrounds, like that's something that I feel like I've never felt like I've always felt like I've always tried to assimilate so that as a Latina woman, I remember graduating college, I used to have a super thick Latina accent, and I would hear it in everything that I would say. And I would try to like try to like kind of, I would say like try to be more cognizant of it so that I wouldn't sound so ethnic. Because it was like not shame, but I just didn't want to stand out. I just wanted to feel like I fit in. And I think that's what a lot of people of color feel in these environments, whether it's super corporate environment or anything that they're not comfortable with. It's like, how do I assimilate? How do I make sure that no one's looking at me like I don't belong here? And it's really hard. Like you have to really get to a place where you're really comfortable with yourself, and you're there for a reason. Lean into that. And, for me, I was like, I will always be the hardest working person in the room. No one can outwork me. I will say that. I might not be the first one in, but I'll be the last one out. And I will make sure that my product is the best and over deliver always. So I feel like that's all you can really do is your best.
Amazing. So when you're looking to work with clients or you're trying to onboard people into your agency, what does that process look like? Are you pursuing people? Are you waiting for them to come to you? Is it a mix? And how do you know somebody's going to be the right fit?
Yeah, it's a mix. We do some outreach. I will say we're grateful that a lot of our clients have been through word of mouth and referral.
Nice.
My first 2 or 3 years in business, about 95% of our clients were referral based, and that was doing no new outreach. And that's why I say if you do good work, people will talk about it and your business can grow organically. Like you don't have to be chasing people. Like I was at a place where I grew faster than I could even handle, which is why I was working 16-hour days, because I was managing talent, but I also was doing contracts. I didn't have a lawyer. And I was also doing finance because I didn't have an accounting person. So I was doing invoicing. And then I was also like negotiating deals because I was managing the talent. Like I was doing everything, which I think is great to be able to do everything within your organization. Because then when you're hiring, you know how to hire properly. All right, I know it's going to take them this amount of time to get this task done, or this is how much talent they can manage. This is the revenue goal for this pod. Like once you've done it all, it helps you understand, okay, what is it that I need? So I would say still most of our new talent is from referral, and then they come reach out to us. And the things we look for are like content quality, engagement, and verticals. So beauty, fashion, lifestyle, parenting, food. What are they posting about? And then also like we're really big on personality. Strangely enough, like that's not something we've had calls with clients that make, have the revenue threshold we're looking for, create great content. And if the call doesn't feel like a good fit, we won't pursue it. Like, I think for us, we spend so much time with the people that we work with internally and then also with our clients that it's like, I don't need someone that's going to like be hard or difficult to work with. I'd rather not.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And when you're working with somebody, on the other side, when it comes to brand deals, because there are other agencies out there that you're competing against, right? As well as people who might not have representation. So what does that look like in terms of finding the right product fit, the right brand who's looking for influencers who are diverse, have the qualities that that your creators have?
Yeah. So I would say our business comes from usually and it depends on the creator, but I would say 50% is through our creator getting reached out to by a brand and then setting those opportunities to us. So at that point, the brand already knows they want to work with this influencer, and then we manage that partnership. The other part, I think, because we've made such a name for ourselves as it pertains to like specifically Black and brown creators in the beauty, fashion, lifestyle, and parenting space. Now they come to us and they say, hey, this is what we have. This is what we're looking for. Do you have any influencers that fit that threshold in terms of followership or vertical or content types or whatever it is? So we'll send recommendations and then we'll get business that way too. So all we can really do is highlight our creator, kind of talk about their insights. Like if they're high converting creators, we could say, hey, listen, like their Amazon storefront, it's linked here. They have a 10% conversion rate. It aligns really well with the brand you're trying to market. So we'll try to look into their insights and see how can we sell them. Or if they're, already posting about the brand, we'll highlight those things. If they haven't posted about the brand, but have posted about similar products, we highlight that content as well and say like they can speak, this is how they would speak to, home decor. This is how they would speak to hair care. So we try to make our pitches as relevant as possible to the specific ask. And at the end of the day, it is the brand or the agency ultimate decision on who they want to work with. But we try to make it as easy as possible so they can see the value that our creators bring, whether it's conversion, content quality, or just like authority in the space. A lot of our creators started in the natural hair space. And so they have an audience that goes to them about how do I, what's the best natural hair product to use if I want to just, do the big chop and go natural? Like, what does that look like? And so we just lean into our creators and their expertise and try to highlight that.
Nice. I'm also wondering about the relationships with the creator communities, like TikTok creators, right? Like there are different communities on every social platform that are trying to internally work with creators and provide resources. Are those, and I obviously I don't want you to have to like call anybody out, but are those useful resources? Do you also work directly with the different platforms for your creators?
Yeah, we haven't done a ton of business through the platforms for our creators. I know that there are creators that do a lot of business. We have done some deals through like TikTok and Instagram. Mostly TikTok. I know TikTok has their like creator marketplace and like there are ways for brands to connect with creators on the platform. It's harder when there's a management company involved because like obviously like we want to negotiate the deal. We want to redline the contract. A lot of our business is through email. From my understanding of the business that's being done on the platform, a lot of it is through the platform. So it's hard for us to manage those deals on their behalf. But I've heard maybe smaller creators find a lot of value in that. We just haven't done a ton of business on those platforms directly within them. They're like influencer marketplace.
Yeah. One thing that we're seeing even for the ads that are appearing, I mean, I remember the Zara, the homepage was, a fan, just user-generated content on their homepage. They had like somebody, like a mirror image, they're in an elevator, and that was user-generated content. And then they have things linking to different outfits. And we see a lot more of this shift of brands and organizations realizing it doesn't matter if they're doing a commercial, a social media post, but they want to show genuine people in their products, whatever creator level that is. And so it's something we're talking a lot about. So I want to hear your perspective on how that market has shifted. We talked a little bit about how it's shifted since the pandemic, but where do you see it going in the next few years? We also know AI is here. So people are like, oh, there's going to be AI influencers. I mean, there are a couple already, but do you see people being replaced, or do you think we still want to see the genuine person and that's just kind of a hyped up thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see more of the UGC content happening across brands. I think from like a cost perspective and just like a content resonance perspective, people don't want to feel like they're being marketed towards all the time. So the more natural they can make an ad feel, I feel like the more it's going to resonate with the viewer and the higher likelihood that they're potentially going to purchase. So I think we're going to continue to see that increase. I think what marketers are trying to figure out now is that Gen Z and millennials are very different. So I think they're also trying to pivot and try to speak to that demographic, because I think now that they've had buying power for a while now, but now they're going to be the new target. And millennials, we're kind of like we have like that weird in between where we're still a little more traditional, but Gen Z is like a whole new beast. And I feel like even with what happened on TikTok, like we just saw that it was like nothing I've ever seen. Even as a business owner, we took a little bit of a hit the year that it really propelled, because a lot of our creators started where YouTube and Instagram first, and then TikTok came out of nowhere. Creators were creating there. Now, who's to know what's going to happen, obviously, with what's happening in the government and the potential ban. Everyone's trying to figure that whole piece out. But I feel like it's just going to continue to increase. The influencer industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. and it's just going to continue to grow. And I think the industry is just going to continue to have to pivot to find ways to not to just because there's so much noise out there. It's like, how do you stand out? And I think it's like, it's tough. I'm not going to say it's an easy feat. I think it's tough. And I think, like I said, Gen Z is a very different generation and the way they consume content. I mean, they were social, they've only known social media, right? Like we were the last generation to know life before that. So I think it's like really figuring out what's going to happen there. And I think with AI, I feel like as marketers, we have to find a way to make it work for our business and our use case. Like there's so many ways that it can benefit businesses. I think a lot of people are scared about getting replaced, but it's like, I think we should pivot and think about how we can use it to improve our business and or create efficiencies. Like we use it a ton for like creating agendas, creating social captions. Even when I'm like thinking about like D&I and how diversity and inclusion is going to shift. Like I'll put some things in there and just kind of get an opinion on like, what do you think about this? And I feel like we just need to use it as a resource and not, I mean, it is scary. I'm not going to say don't be scared, but let's just try not to like let it consume us and like learn how to use it. Cause I think I was on the panel earlier this week and they were saying like, instead of being scared that it's going to replace your job, find a way to understand it and learn it so that you're more valuable as an employee because that's what they're going to be looking for. Employers are going to be looking for people who know how to leverage AI.
Yeah, exactly. And the AI influencers that are out there, that's like a thing, but you think it's just, it's a trend or whatever, but it's not going to take over. So that's good.
I don't think it's going to take over. I feel like I understand the interest and the intrigue. Doesn't really do it for me personally. And I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen anybody really talk about, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this AI influencer. Like no one's talking about that, right? People are still going to want, like there still has to be an element that's a person, like there's still a connection that has to be made and you can't just replace that with a robot. Like people still desire human interaction, human connection. And I don't think that's going to go away. So I feel like AI can only really go so far, personally, in my opinion, unless we completely shift as like and that would be so far from where we are. So I think it's going to be years before that even is something that it would have to be generations after us.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Because I love AI, but not for the content I want to see on social media necessarily. Not actually seeing what people are doing and what they're recommending. And you just talked about being on a panel and with the work that you do. I know we were speaking before we jumped on also about your work in D&I and being on panels for that, discussing it for corporations. So what does that look like for you? And obviously you can use your own lived experience, the experience that you have of building a creator community that's a safe space. But what other are things that you want people to know? Because same thing, during the pandemic, we saw a shift and now we're kind of seeing a backlash and a lot of us don't feel as safe. I have dual citizenship. So I'm like, I can always peace out to Thailand if I need to, but we're here.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because even with the pandemic, obviously there was a shift. And then after the pandemic was BLM, right? Where everybody was checking on corporations and brands and agencies and like everyone was who's doing the work, who's not doing the work, what does your team look like, what are your marketing, everyone was just a flashlight was just put off on everyone and then people realized, oh no, I'm dropping the ball here, dropping the ball there. So I will say it was great from our business. For initially I was terrified because the pandemic hit. I was like, oh my God, am I going to have a business? And then BLM happened and then people understand the value of working with diverse creators. And it was nice to finally be acknowledged and feel like we were being seen. And I feel like since then, a lot of corporations and brands have kind of gotten back to their ways. And I don't think they're pushing D&I as much as they used to. Even internally, like a lot of corporations are dissolving their DE&I teams. And it's concerning. And I mean, not even to get into politics, but when you talk about, what the new administration's position is going to do to whether it's like affirmative action or like there's just so much that's happening that I feel like we are going a little bit back. And I think like, I don't want to get into politics, but talking about reparations and like how and it's just like people of color need reparations because there was slavery for so many years and we're so behind because we weren't getting paid. And so like that's trying to get us back to an even playing field. So I say that to say that I think there's still work to be done. I want to say that it's also important to not just cast diverse influencers for marketing campaigns and initiatives, but internal teams have to also be representative of what society looks like. It's not just about throwing a Black or a brown person on a campaign. It's about making sure that those teams are diverse themselves, right? And represent people from all walks of life so that then when they're making the decisions on who needs to be put in these campaigns, they are making sure they're seeing themselves. Because what's happening is that there's a lot of organizations that are not focusing on bringing diverse people into their corporations, and then the casting list and then what's happening on screen and on our phones isn't representative of what we look like, because they might be subconsciously biased and not realize, oh no, like I forgot to put, a person with disabilities on this, or a person with Muslim on this campaign, or, and I just feel like it's a lot of people going like, uh-oh, my bad, my mistake, we're so sorry. And it's like, how about you just get ahead of it and just make sure you're doing the right thing from the beginning, so that we're not getting to a place where you have to apologize as a brand for missing the bar. Because, there's been so many places that I've worked at where I've been the only person of color, but my experience as a person of color is not the same as like a Black woman's experience. I'm a Latina woman, and I know people who have different lived experiences that I can't speak to, right? So it shouldn't be on me, the only person of color in a room, to speak to all these experiences. Like, that's a lot of pressure also to put on one person, because in your experience as well, like I wouldn't know what that's like. So I feel like corporations just need to do better and find ways to invest in these initiatives. And that way we're just working towards a better inclusive future, period.
Yeah. Nice. And when somebody is maybe thinking about, they realize, they have a good audience, they might think, oh, maybe I should really look at being a creator, making some money off of this. What are the recommendations that you have for somebody who might be starting out? Should they focus on one platform? Should they focus on more? Should they focus on a specific type of content?
Yeah, I would say lean into whatever you're really passionate about, and also like use your audience as a focus group. If if you look at what you're posting, let's say you're deciding between business or finance or whatever the categories are, post about those things. Look at your engagement, look at your backend insights. What are people engaging with? What do you think people are most interested in? And also, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself to one category. We're also versatile. If you can talk about finance and also talk about business, but also want to sprinkle in some fashion, like don't stay in one lane just because you feel like you have to. I would say like talk about what you're really passionate about, and consistency is everything. Whichever platform you choose, consistency is everything. That's the biggest piece of feedback we've gotten from the platforms in terms of how to grow, like because we had calls with TikTok and Instagram. We're like, what's the best way? And they say consistency, like posting every day if you can, posting several times a day if you can. There's so much content out there that it's like, if you're going to be, you have higher likelihood of being seen and growing if you're posting consistently. So whichever platform you choose, I'm an Instagram girly. I haven't fallen down the TikTok rabbit hole, which I know a lot of people are in. I just was like, I'm already distracted by this platform. I don't need a platform to distract me even more so. I'm already distracted. So I would say just lean in on the platform that you're using the most. And also don't be afraid to syndicate the content. Let's say you create it for Instagram and you want to, post it on TikTok, do that. Or if you create TikTok content, you can syndicate it to Instagram. But I would say consistency is king. Engage with your audience, provide insight, make sure that your content's either educational, inspirational, or informational, educational, inspirational, because I feel like that's how they will gain value from your content, and that's how you'll grow. And video, I feel like, is still king. Instagram said they're prioritizing carousels now, but I feel like we've given a lot of micro creators, like Nano, I guess, under 10K, like post once a day on Reels or twice a day, and you will grow. And everyone, for the most part, that we've spoken to, that we've given that strategy to, as long as they have like good content and it's like, engaging, has grown by tens of thousands. So I would say, challenge yourself to do a reel a day and just look at the growth that'll come from that. But I would say that's where I would start.
Amazing. That's great advice. And it's also great advice for somebody like myself who used to be really consistent, get a lot of engagement, and then tried to change my platform to more of a business platform, fail miserably. And then I have not been consistent at all. So these are all good reminders for myself and for anybody also who is a business owner or a person living their life who may not want to, go into the field, but who just still needs these tips. So,
And I would say even for yourself, if you're seeing that like the business, because I've thought about that too. Like, should I start a new channel and talk about, influencer marketing knowledge? Because I don't know if my audience right now wants to see all I post is like, travel and food and so if I'm like, gotta become an influencer, I feel like I might lose people. So be open to, starting a new channel. We always think it's like lean into the audience you have, but if you do that and it's not resonating, be okay to start a new channel. There will be an audience for that, like the content that you're creating. Just keep an open mind for sure. But it's also very time consuming. So give yourself grace. It is not easy and it's a lot of work.
yeah, fantastic. My last question to everybody is always, because of course we're going to have ways to link to you in the show notes, but I want to know, do you have a favorite mantra, family motto, quote, verse, words that continue to inspire you and that you use to inspire yourself and or others?
I think one that I've been using lately, and I think is something that I wish I would have like told myself before, is like, you are good enough, right? You are doing enough and you are good enough. Because I feel like your mental when you start a business, it's completely you're starting from zero, right? Because you're like, I'm going to create something and I just hope people like it or want it, and then you're kind of building up that confidence. Whereas like I worked in the industry for 10 years before I started my agency, and I had already built that. I was like, I am good enough, I got this role, I got this. But when you're starting a new business, you're like kind of starting at the bottom again, where you need your clients to tell you that you are doing a good job. You don't really need it. Well, you do need it, but I felt like I needed that external validation. And I think now that I'm 5 years in, I'm always still like, okay, what more can I do? What else can I do? Am I doing enough? Should I double our roster? Should I grow our team? Should I? And it's like, why am I doing it? Am I doing it to prove that I can? Am I doing it because I think it's going to add value in a different way? And it's kind of what I'm being called to do. So I would say you are good enough and you are doing enough and it's all going to be okay. It's all going to work out.
Awesome. This has been so fun. And I have a lot of thoughts and like introductions and like further conversations I want to have with you. But I'm so grateful that we were introduced and that you're able to come on the podcast today. So thank you, Pamela.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to connect after.
Yeah, same. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share some tips and tricks for you on your business and personal journey. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.